To give perspective on tonight's topic, I want you to see an actual video of what it's like for the person who feels suicidal and as well what it feels like for those who are left behind. Ashley died on January 30th, 2012. She committed suicide at the age of 17. She was a Bel Air high school student. She played volleyball, had lots of friends, and nearly 4,000 Twitter followers. Ashley freely shared her feelings on social media. She was beautiful and talented. On the day she died, she posted a picture of the gun. It appears that her followers did not take her seriously. The outcome for Ashley might have been different if they had. In the audience today is Ashley's mother. At the end of the presentation, I would like for her to share with you what she has done to honor Ashley's memory and to see that what she experienced does not happen to another parent. So today, we're going to look at the link between social media and suicide. And before I begin, I'd like to thank the organizers for this event. Thank you, Dr. Stanford, for the invitation and the introduction. Thank you to Beth Woodman, Liz Crockett, Julia Abbott, all the people who have assisted me in bringing this presentation to you. Suicide is one of those topics that people feel uncomfortable talking about it, but it is an uncomfortable truth. And it's important to be able to discuss a topic such as this because in the event that someone comes to you and they do want to talk, it's important for us to know what to say, how to respond, and to provide high touch even in a high-tech society. The learning objectives for tonight are as follows: to be able to recognize the warning signs of suicidal behavior, to articulate specific ways that social media can increase the risk of suicidal behavior, to distinguish between monitoring and spying when it comes to a loved one's social media use, and to be able to actually summarize some opening statements to begin a conversation with the suicidal loved one. And finally, to identify specific ways that social media can prevent suicidal behavior. So for the outline today, I'll give you some definitions, we'll talk about warning signs, and I'll even provide a definition for social media. The specific risks of social media, what to say if a loved one is suicidal, what to do if a loved one, what to actually do if a loved one is suicidal, and then a summary. So let's start with a definition. And when it comes to the definition for suicide, the definition for suicide has typically focused on two things: behavior and intent. And so the traditional definition is that it is a death caused by self-directed injurious behavior with any intent to die as a result of behavior. In the United States, there are 30,000 suicides committed each year. And it's estimated that 800,000 suicidal attempts are made. This traditional definition is focused more on what the person does. However, I prefer this definition, and this is the one that I'll be working from today, and that is, it's a purpose-driven behavior designed to either eliminate or manage unbearable levels of pain in one's current life. The reason why I am more concerned about this perspective is because it helps us to better understand the self-directed injurious behavior, that this is the person's way of trying to eliminate pain. When a person gets to the point where they are considering suicide, they have made the statement that their pain exceeds their coping resources. And one way to address suicidal behavior is to help the person to eliminate the pain that they are experiencing, as well as to help the person to develop the coping resources in order to address their pain. Warning signs. When it comes to warning signs, I've broken the warning signs into 3 different categories. And each category comes with its own pain. So there are some conditions that are associated with suicide, and many of these conditions represent what we call exit events. That these are events that have occurred that has left the person feeling as if something has changed and it will never be like it was. So something has left. So they have exit events that they're facing, and these exit events cause a tremendous amount of pain. An example of a condition or exit event would be death or terminal illness of a relative, divorce, separation, broken relationship, of course, loss of health, loss of job, home status, money, self-esteem. And one of the ways in which a person may cope with these exit events is to turn to alcohol or drugs. The alcohol or drugs may be used to help to numb the person from becoming or experiencing the pain. However, the alcohol and or drugs end up becoming another condition, because now they're in a position where they are not able to deal with the pain without using the alcohol or the drugs. And so that becomes yet another condition that leads to the unbearable pain. And then, of course, depression. And when looking at the literature, when it comes to depression, mood disorder has been closely related to suicidal behavior. And according to the literature, depression is number 1 when it comes to a condition that is likely to lead to suicidal thoughts or suicidal behavior, followed by bipolar 2, then bipolar 1. And so having a mood disorder, and particularly depression, is a condition or a warning sign that someone could be suicidal. The next warning sign would be emotional and behavioral warning signs. And as indicated before, overwhelming pain. A study conducted by the University of British Columbia interviewed 120 people who attempted suicide. When they were asked why they did it, the overwhelming response was hopelessness and intolerable pain. And so overwhelming pain is closely related to that underlying factor that leads to the self-directed behavior and intent to take one's life. Most clinicians agree that the act of suicide is a way that the person feels is their only option to eliminate the intolerable pain. And when it comes to suicide, the hopelessness that this will not get better and the powerlessness to change a situation that they believe is contributing to the pain is a part of the picture as well. Worthlessness, feeling sad, anxious, irritable, withdrawn, the social isolation, declining performance and interest, neglect of personal welfare, alterations in sleeping and or eating behaviors, that too is a part of the emotional and behavioral signs of suicide. And then the final category is actual suicidal behavior. 70% of the people who actually commit suicide tell someone about their plans. And the best predictor for a person actually committing suicide is a previous attempt. And so if there's someone who's made a previous attempt, that is someone that has to be watched closely, because research indicates that this is a person who might actually attempt again, and this time might actually commit suicide. Explicit statements of suicidal feelings, that's quite common, that people, again, will actually say that they are thinking about taking their life. A plan, acquiring means, and rehearsal, setting a time. And so in the video that you watched, it was clear that Ashley made a plan, she acquired the means, and she did a rehearsal before she actually committed the act, and then setting a time when it'll be done. Individuals with self-inflicted injuries are also suspect when it comes to suicidal behavior, and so it should not be taken lightly. Or a person engaging in reckless behavior. One of the things that they found is sometimes an unexplained accident might serve as a sign when it comes to the elderly, not following doctor's orders or not following dietary restrictions, the things that he or she needs to do in order to maintain health, that too might be a sign. And for youth, unexplained accidents. So again, some recklessness, one might have to take a closer look at that. And then of course the classic signs, giving away prized possessions and then saying goodbye in a very ambiguous way. So saying things like, you don't have to worry about me anymore, or I'm going to take a long trip. Those kinds of things, again, need to be followed up on in terms of inquiry, in terms of what else might be going on with the person. Another example would be if a person is engaging in a lot of morbid kind of writing, or if they are joking about things that have a morbid theme to them. Again, more things to take seriously. When it comes to who's at risk, especially given today's topic, suicidal behavior and social media, it's by far our youth. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for college students, the third leading cause of death for persons between the ages of 15 and 24, and it's believed that the rate may have increased by over 40% just within the past decade, and the actual rate might even be 25 to 30% higher than what we think it is. What puts youth at risk when it comes to suicide has to do with what they're going through developmentally. Developmentally, this is a time when youth are trying to separate from parents. They are attempting to individuate, and they need to fit in with their peers. There's a strong desire to fit in with their peers. They don't want to be seen as different. This is especially exacerbated for those teens with a mental illness, because with the mental illness comes social stigma, shame, secrecy, and social isolation. For example, a teen who's been diagnosed with cancer and has to go through chemotherapy, and it leads to the loss of all of that teen's hair, that teen's classmates may actually rally around him or her, and they may even shave their own head as an act of solidarity with that teen. However, if a teen is diagnosed as having a mental illness, those same peers may ostracize him or her. And so when it comes to having a mental illness, the teen would rather do behaviors that will make it seem as if he or she fits in rather than face the ostracism and rejection that comes with having a mental illness. Another thing that puts a teen at risk has to do with his or her limited life experience. By the time someone gets my age, they realize that you're going to have many peaks and valleys and hills and all of those kinds of experiences, and that you're not in the valley always, that you'll come out of the valley and then things will get better, and then you're going to go back in the valley for a little while. So you understand that. When a teen has a valley experience, their limited life experience suggests to them that it's never going to get better, that I'm always going to stay here. And so the teen that has limited coping resources may experience hopelessness that this will ever change. And so for persons who work with teens or have young family members, it's important to keep that in perspective. The other thing that we sometimes do, because we know that our young family members have these limited life experiences, we tell them that. You haven't lived life. You don't know what it's like to have it hard. I can tell you about what's hard. What we do is we end up invalidating their experience. And when we invalidate them, we communicate to them that they really can't talk to us about their feelings. And so they will need to go somewhere to feel as if they are heard. Now, that is not our intent to invalidate them, but that is how it is experienced by young people. So when it comes to suicide, just want to reiterate that here in the United States, there are 30,000 suicide deaths annually and probably 800,000 suicide attempts. However, suicide itself is a very complex act. It is not just one event that pushes a person to the point where he or she takes his or her life. That suicide has many moving parts. It includes a family history of suicide, family history of mental illness, one's own mental illness, the capacity to cope with stress, perceived social support. All of these things sort of form a cocktail that can lead to a person coming to the conclusion, suicide is my only option. Now, the question that we're going to try to address tonight is, does social media add to the complexity? So what exactly is the link when it comes to social media and suicide? Well, let's first start. What exactly is social media? So when it comes to social media, of course, it's a fusion of technology with social interaction via internet-based applications. And so this allows for people to be able to communicate with people they know, people that they don't know, on certain social media platforms that include chat rooms, blogging, websites, video sites, email. And just to put things in perspective when it comes to social media, in June 2004, Facebook reported having 1 million users in 2004. By June 2011, Facebook reported 700 million users. So social media is here to stay. And it is possible that persons who are suicidal may seek out a social media platform in an attempt to try to eliminate some of the pain that they are experiencing. So now the question remains, does the internet help or hinder suicide prevention? And the answer is, I don't know. I honestly don't know, because it is difficult to assess that. We cannot come up with what is called a cause and effect relationship. That we cannot do. However, it is important to think about why it's difficult to really assess this. It's important to really look at why it's difficult to assess this. First of all, the relationship at best would be more indirect and complex because there are other factors that are probably involved when it comes to the use of social media. The other reason why it's difficult to assess has to do with the legal complexities involved. For example, if a child is being cyberbullied and the bullying is taking place off of school grounds, can the school really tell someone that you cannot do this? Okay, so where do we draw the line? So even when we know of things happening, we have to take into consideration that there are some legal complexities involved. And so, for example, if it's a school that wants to be able to address a cyberbully, they have to first make sure that it shows a clear disruption to the educational process or a true threat. Okay, and of course there will be lawyers on both sides arguing whether or not it's an actual disruption. And then the other thing is, people say that they have freedom of speech and they can say pretty much whatever they want to say, and social media will serve as a platform for them to do so. And so this is a difficult area to assess. However, research has determined that there are some specific risks when it comes to social media and suicide. In a study where a researcher used suicide as a key word, he looked at the first 373 hits. Of those hits, it was found that 11% would direct the user to a pro-suicide website. That is, telling the person how to commit suicide. So 11%. Now, the rest of the sites were either suicide neutral or anti-suicide. But again, that is a risk for people who may have a history of mental illness or people who are seeking the internet as a way of finding answers. Then, of course, there is cyberbullying. When it comes to cyberbullying, very interesting things to kind of consider when it comes to cyberbullying. There are certain websites that cyberbullies tend to use to harass their victims, and there are certain websites that persons who are harassed tend to use. For example, the websites that cyberbullies typically use to harass their victims: Grindr, I just found out what that was today. Kick, K-I-K, and the interesting thing about Kick is that no parental controls. So parents cannot control it, 0 parental controls. And then the third one is Skype. So those appear to be the top cyberbullying medium. On the other hand, persons who are victims of cyberbullying, they are more likely to use Twitter and Skype. They're more likely to use those. When it comes to the way in which cyberbullying might lead to a person who is at risk to commit suicide to maybe actually kill themselves, which is now referred to as cyberbullicide, is that it can be done in several ways. It can be done in the form of a threat. A threat is something that the cyberbully will usually send via email to their victim. It can also be done through something called flaming. And with flaming, that is spreading vicious rumors, vicious gossip about the individual. Another way in which a cyberbully might act is through something called the masquerade, where they will fake their online profile in order to harass the victim. Another way in which a cyberbully may attack is through something called outing, and that is when they threaten to reveal very embarrassing or very information that might be considered shameful about the victim. And so kind of understanding how cyberbullies act and what they typically do to harass is very important, especially for those of you who have young ones in your care, to know what to look for when it comes to this type of risk. And then another risk that can occur on social media is the suicide pact. Strangers can actually meet in chat rooms, discussion forums, and form a pact to make the decision to commit suicide. And that is called cyber suicide. 40 years ago, the forming of a suicide pact, that is not new. However, it was typically among people who knew each other. With the now in the age of social media, people can now form pacts even with strangers. And then there's media contagion. That too is a specific risk for persons who have depression or who might be considering suicide. Media contagion has to do with the fascination about ways to commit suicide. That is publicized, it's talked about, and for persons who are thinking about suicide, that may give them an idea about how to do it. Yes? Can you give the definition of cyberbullicide again, please? Yes. Cyberbullicide is when a person commits suicide after being cyberbullied. And so the cyberbullying would take the form of one of those ways that I indicated, either through threat, flaming, masquerading, and outing. And so that is a person. There have been some very, very high-profile cases of cyberbullicide. Amanda, can't think of her last name. Todd. Okay. That was an example of a cyberbullicide. Did that help any? Okay. You're welcome. All right. So I mentioned that youth are especially at risk. And here's some statistics to kind of give you an idea of how youth are at risk. Some of the stats I looked at, they say that 22% log into their favorite social media site more than 10 times a day. Okay. 75% have cell phones. And I put this in red. 7.5 hours per day spent on electronic media. Okay. That's a lot of time. 1 in 5 teens engage in sexting, okay, and 50% use the internet to do their schoolwork. And so there's some things that we all need the internet in order to be able to do, to be able to function, but it's also important to kind of understand the kinds of risks that are out there. Now, when it comes to adolescents, adolescents are actually part of a digital generation. And in fact, they're called digital natives. I am a digital immigrant. Okay, that is not my world, but I'm forced to function in it. And so for persons who are digital natives, they may be tethered to their electronic media 24 hours a day if they were allowed to do so. It's difficult for them to be without their cell phones. And one of the best illustrations that I've seen of living in a digital age, there was a commercial about 2 or 3 years ago about a little boy in a classroom who obviously had to do a speech for an assignment. He had a fear of speaking, and on the commercial, you see him look up the term glossophobia. And so he turns to the internet to get an answer about what to do about his fear of speaking. He didn't go to the teacher, didn't go to an adult, went straight to the internet to find the answer. He gets up, he does a wonderful speech, and while he's doing the speech, he sees a little girl smile at him. He goes back to the internet to find out how to talk to girls. And so the internet provides quick answers. You can find what you're looking for right away, and you don't have to worry about the middleman. The internet gives you exactly what you need. That's especially been the case, for a lot of youth. And the other thing that is that's very interesting about the internet is that if a young person is feeling something, they can pretty much say what they want to say and how they want to say it right there on the internet. Okay, there's no one to tell them any different. The other thing is that they can find like-minded people on the internet. They may not feel as if they have those like-minded people around them in the non-cyber world, but on the internet, they can be who they want to be. The other thing that the internet allows for is an immediate response. And so there's some people who will constantly go and find out if someone likes what they said. So throughout the day, they're looking to see how many likes they have. And so for a lot of young people, that anonymity, that immediate feedback is one of the reasons why the internet is quite popular. On the other hand, research also shows that the more time a child or a young person spends on the internet, the more they're going to be exposed to those risks. So it opens them up to things like the cyberbullying. It opens them up to posting something that is inappropriate, to sending something that is inappropriate. And so even though technology is something that is actually needed, it's important to know what the risks are. Okay. So I mentioned there's an increased risk of exposure to cyber aggression. About 1/3 of our young people report being targeted. The longer someone stays on the internet or uses social media, they also have an increased risk of something called Facebook depression. And with Facebook depression, that is something that usually occurs after someone is befriended. And so that can lead to the person feeling rejected, abandoned, and depressed. And I mentioned before, there's an increased risk of making an inappropriate post, sending a picture they do not need to send, and facing possible outing as a result of sending something that they don't need to send. And then the other thing that happens when there's increased time spent on the internet, that means that there's probably limited time between parents and youth. Okay? And so something has to give. Now again, I am very well aware that every time new technology comes out, and that's been throughout time, people have always talked about the evil. People talked about the evil of the automobile and how the car was the way to go. And so throughout time, whenever there's been something new, people have talked about some of the bad things that are associated with it. So let me say one good thing about social media. One of the things that social media can actually do, in some instances, it really can increase the connection between a child and maybe a family member that they do not see that often. So being able to Skype that grandparent, that is important. That's a good thing. Or being able to stay in contact with relatives who live far away, that there are some good things that happen. They even talk about how children can use the internet to do class projects, to collaborate on things. So there are some good things, but it's important to keep this in balance and to be aware that there's some good things, but there are also some things to be aware of. So when it comes to social media and suicide and protecting especially a young person from what can happen in the cyber world, several things to take into consideration. That when devices are purchased, it's important that ground rules are set for internet use at the very beginning. And there's a website. It's actually called the Family Online Safety Institute. They have a sample contract that parents can draw up with their children in terms of what the ground rules are going to be for the use of technology in the home. And one of the things that is strongly recommended is for the parents to get to know the technology, to know exactly how to use the technology, to know what their child's habits are. One of the signs that a child is actually being bullied in some instances is that they stop using technology. So they won't use the phone as often because they're concerned about what they'll see. And in instances with people, with young people who are doing the cyberbullying, one of the things that they will do is to be very secretive about how they're using their technology. And so learning how to use the technology is important. Getting to know a child's habits, keeping the computer in an open location where parents can see what the child is doing. When the child is online, asking the child to avoid filling out questionnaires or signing up to get free things. That's something that's important. Monitoring what the child puts on social media in terms of pictures. That too is important. And part of that contract is for the purpose of transparency. That it tells the child that I'm aware that my parent is very much concerned that I am safe when I am on the internet, and therefore my parent will monitor what I am doing. And so this is monitoring, it's not spying. Spying is clandestine. That means that you're not supposed to know. No one's supposed to know. This is monitoring. The child has been informed that your role as parent is to be able to monitor what he or she does when it comes to social media. The other thing is for the parent to be a role model when it comes to the use of technology, because sometimes parents are just as tethered to their devices as the child is. And so having a device-free mealtime or just a device-free time where the cell phone is put down, not looked at, when it starts making those little noises, grabbing it and all that. Okay, no texting and driving, and so whatever the child would like for the parent to do, the parent has to be able to do it himself or herself. The other thing that is recommended is to actually friend one's child on social media. Now, if the decision is made to friend one's child, it's also important not to embarrass the child on social media and to not post things to the wall or to send messages that the child might find embarrassing. And so those are some of the things that can assist in being a part of one's loved one's cyber world. And it also gives the parent a way of seeing the child in another kind of environment, another kind of setting. Things that the child may not say to the parent is important for the child to know what he's saying to others who may be strangers. And reminding the youth especially that there is no such thing as privacy on the internet anyway. No such thing as privacy. Once something goes on the internet, it stays on the internet. So helping young people be aware of that is very important. Now, part of what we're talking about today has to do with if you are aware that a loved one is suicidal, to have the actual words to say, to know exactly what to say. Because another study that I read indicated that even in a high-tech age, people, even teens, still crave high touch. For example, a professor at Ohio State University did a study where he asked young people to reveal the order in which they seek help when depressed. The top 5 things that they're likely to do when seeking help. The number one thing that they identified as what they would do is talk to a friend or family member. So even in this high-tech age, talking to a friend or family member is number one when it comes to what they would do if they're depressed. But then I'd like for you to listen carefully to numbers 2, 4, and 5. Number 2, they would send a text message. Number 3, they would talk on the phone. Number 4, use instant messaging. And then number 5 was post to a social networking site. And so the use of social media is in the top 5 when it comes to how people see themselves getting help for painful feelings that they are experiencing. But let's focus on number 1. Based upon this research, there's a good chance that you will be that friend or family member that someone reaches out to. And let's first talk about what not to say if someone reaches out to you. You wouldn't do anything stupid, would you? That's what not to say. Another thing not to say would be, you're not suicidal, are you? Okay. What that does, that increases the shame. It increases a sense of belittlement, of ostracism. The person feels more and more alone, and it closes down the opportunity to have a discussion. So when we start to phrase an opening statement for talking about suicide, a way to begin it is to ask, are you having thoughts of suicide? That we are communicating it's okay to talk about this. And what it does, it dispels the myth that if you talk to someone about committing suicide, you're putting the idea in their head. No. When you ask if you're feeling or having thoughts of suicide, it shows that you care. Even telling someone you need to hear that people do get through this, even people who feel as badly as you are feeling now, research indicates that it's okay to try to persuade someone not to commit suicide. That is okay, perfectly okay. Asking somebody to give themselves some distance, to wait 24 hours before doing anything, or a week, and to remind them that how they're feeling now is not what they may be feeling in a day, 2 days, a week, etc. And so asking someone to give themselves some distance between what they are feeling and what they want to do about it. Some other things, letting them know that this is something that people do because they are seeking relief from pain. Again, understanding that this is pain that's motivating this decision. And that they want relief, but to realize that you have to be alive to experience relief. And then letting the person know that they're not a bad person, they're not crazy, they're not weak or flawed because they feel suicidal. It doesn't even mean that they really want to die. It means that they have more pain than they can cope with right now. And so another way in which I view suicidal behavior is that it really is a cry for help. If someone tells you that they are thinking about suicide, that means that there is some ambivalence, that there is some room there to help them to make another kind of decision. And for those of you who are clinicians, typically what the person wants, eliminate the pain, help me to improve my coping resources so that I can better deal with it. Okay. So the first part was what to do, what to say. Now let's look at what to do. And of course, as clinicians, you know that we take it seriously. Every suicidal verbalization, every ideation, we take it seriously. And if we think that someone is in immediate danger, if we believe they're in immediate danger, we don't call a counselor. We call 911. Thank you. Okay, we call 911. And so let's break down immediate. Immediate means they've already taken the pills. Immediate means that they're already on the window ledge. Immediate means that they have the weapon in hand. And so if there is immediate danger, we are to give and get help sooner rather than later. And so that counts as an emergency. Sometimes what we need to do, and which the person just really requires of us, is to listen and to not say much, not to give any advice, but to sit with them in their pain and to demonstrate by our willingness to sit with them that we care. For some people, that leads to some of the relief that they need. And even if the person says they feel better as a result of you listening and doing the things that can help to maybe start to give them a little bit more hope, it is still important to urge the person to receive professional help. You saw the person in crisis mode. By urging them to get professional help, you are now helping to usher them into recovery mode. And so we don't just leave them there when they say they feel a little bit better. They need to receive some professional help as well. And then the other thing is that it's important to also split up the responsibility for another person's welfare and well-being as well. So having that professional, that's very important in the person getting the kind of help that they need. And then the other thing is the no secrets. We cannot promise to keep any secrets for them. That if the person says, please don't tell anyone about this, that's a secret that we cannot keep. That one of the reasons why they don't want us to tell that they are suicidal is because they don't want to experience the shame or the stigma that is associated with being suicidal. And so we're going to align ourselves with the healthy part of them that actually shared that they were suicidal and assist them in really getting the help that they need. Okay. When it comes to social media, one of the things that is now happening is that social media is now moving in the area of prevention when it comes to suicide. It's moving into the area of prevention. And so there are actually social networking sites for suicide prevention that can facilitate social connection among peers with similar experiences and increase awareness of prevention programs, crisis helplines, and other support and educational resources. So there are some things that social media is now willing to take responsibility for. And so if the suicidal person or the suicidal youth does not have a person they feel comfortable going to, social media is now taking on that role of actively trying to prevent suicide. So let's look at some of the things that social media is now doing. In the UK, I checked to see if we have this in the United States right now. I could not find that we currently have this, but in the UK, there is actually a panic button application that people can push if they see someone being harassed online. And what that will do, that will alert the help center at Facebook about harassing posts. And so there is the panic button application that is now being used on a social media site. Now here in the US, there is a suicide alert reporting system on Facebook, so that if someone notices that there are posts being made about someone being suicidal, the help center at Facebook can be alerted to someone's suicidal ideation. And even the military is beginning to use social media to increase suicide awareness and prevention. And so with the notion that more and more people are using the internet and that people may be more likely to go to the internet than maybe even go to a family member or friend, social media has decided to step up and take on more responsibility when it comes to suicide awareness and prevention.
Do you happen to have a name for the one you mentioned earlier, that's the social media site that connects people with similar experiences?
No, I don't have that one. I don't have that one. Okay. Responding to a cry for help. And I found this, it talked about best practices for online technologies. And this is actually for any organization that has an online presence, because it is possible that they can encounter someone who is suicidal. And very good website. I went ahead and included the information there below. But on this particular website, they talk about what social media sites like Facebook are actually doing to respond to a cry for help. And this is what the Facebook page actually looks like if someone posts something in regards to suicide. Okay? So it tells them exactly how to report suicidal content. It also provides links to different suicide hotlines or organizations. It also gives a basic frequently asked questions when it comes to suicide. It gives suicide prevention tips, and then they also have it where, if necessary, they can respond to the post themselves to check on the individual who has made the post. And so there is something to kind of think about when it comes to social media, that they are beginning to take more responsibility when it comes to suicide ideation. Okay. In summary, when it comes to suicidal behavior, we can choose to focus on the behavior and the intent, or we can try to address the underlying pain. For those who are considering suicide, it's important to understand that they have reached the point where their pain exceeds their perceived ability to cope. Social media may be used as a venue to express these feelings, but there are risks involved in doing so. That is, those who are the most vulnerable may open themselves up to even more pain and frustration when it comes to their coping resources. Also, when they express how they feel on social media, there is no guarantee that they will receive the help that they need. And for youth in particular, establishing guidelines that discuss what the rules are going to be for their online presence, that is very important at the outset. It's important for the youth to understand that their online presence will be monitored so that there's transparency and there's not a sense that they're being spied on. Even though youth spend about 7.5 hours online per day, when they are depressed, they still want to reach out to a person. if you happen to be that person, it's important to know what to say that may start the process for the person to experience less pain and be encouraged to actually seek professional help. When listening, it's important to be non-judgmental and to not give advice, but to be present with the person as they sit with their pain. And even if they don't come to you, one thing that is encouraging is that more and more websites are taking responsibility for increasing one's awareness of suicide prevention.